Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith. Tonight, dozens of people are killed in twin attacks in Somalia. Al-Shabaab extremists claim responsibility, saying that they were targeting politicians in a bid to disrupt already stalled elections. Also, Tunisian farmers take the law into their own hands in the midst of an ongoing water crisis. Poor planning, scarce water resources, and the worsening impact of climate change have all hit the country's agricultural industry hard. And Mauritius, Libya and Ivory Coast are some of Africa's happiest countries. On the other end of the scale, out of the 146 nations around the world surveyed, 8 out of the bottom 10 also hail from the continent. We hear from our correspondent in Abidjan. But first, at least 48 people have been killed in 2 bombings that targeted Somali politicians. Extremist group Al-Shabaab says that they were trying to disrupt key elections that will pave the way for picking the president. The first suicide attack on Wednesday night claimed the life of 2 lawmakers in central Shabaab state. Minutes later, a bomb went off outside the hospital where the injured were being taken. Wasim Kone has more.
It's been 24 hours, but the damage is still obvious. The blast radius visible to all. Dozens of people were killed in this twin terror attack in central Somalia, which began when a suicide bomber blew himself up in a street.
qaraxa markuu dhacay kadib wixii dhaawacyo ahaa meeshaas ka dhacay meedidkii sida caadadu tahay waxa la keenay isbitaalka weyn ayaa haddana gaari kale oo gaari noocan la yiraahdo noohada la yiraahdo ayaa waxay isku qarxisay isbitaalka hortiisa waa aragtaan isbitaalka si uu burbursan yahay.
2 local lawmakers who were campaigning for the upcoming elections were killed in the initial blast. In a tweet, Somalia's president paid tribute to one of them, Member of Parliament Amina Mohammed Abdi. Local authorities have promised they would not back down in the face of violence.
Man yajiib doono bulshada adeegii loo hayay haday doorasho tahay iyo haday horumar tahay intaba waa laga shaqeynaa insha Allah hadii la raali ka noqdo Allahna tala saarayna waana dadaalayna bulshadana waxaan leenahay hal fool jignaado.
The attack has been claimed by the Al-Shabaab insurgent group affiliated with Al-Qaeda. It has tried to overthrow Somalia's government for over a decade.
Ethiopia's announced a unilateral and indefinite humanitarian truce to allow aid to be delivered into the northern region of Tigray. Hundreds of thousands there face starvation. The US and TPLF fighters have been at war. The TPLF fighters who have been at war with federal forces since November 2020 have accused the government of stopping aid with a de facto blockade. The government's denied this. The UN said that no aid trucks have made it into Tigray since last December. The truce has been welcomed internationally, but the TPLF hasn't yet responded. It's unclear how the central government will enforce the truce as regional fighters and volunteers have continued to battle the TPLF. Air pollution campaigners who won their case against the South African government earlier this month have spoken out about their victory. The coal mining belt in the Mpumalanga Highveld region has the most polluted air in the world. It has 12 coal-fired plants, and hundreds of local deaths and high rates of asthma, lung cancer and bronchitis have been blamed on the toxic air. Environmental groups took the government to court for violating their right to clean air, and the High Court delivered a landmark ruling giving authorities a year to reduce air pollution. Activists say the judgment sets an important precedent.
This is a groundbreaking decision that's been handed down by the Pretoria High Court. It revolves around the very unsafe levels of air pollution on the Mpumalanga Highveld, a region in the northern part of South Africa. And the court declared that the very, very high levels of air pollution on the Mpumalanga Highveld are a breach of Residence Section 24A right to an environment that is not harmful to the health and well-being. It is the first time in South African law, constitutional law specifically, that we've had an order from a High Court of this nature.
Well, many Tunisians still can't count on regular access to clean water. The problem's particularly bad in rural areas. And for farmers who count on substantial amounts of water for their crops, the problem can seem even more insurmountable. The scarcity in the arid country has been made worse by climate change, as our team reports.
The highway to Zaghouan in Tunisia's north runs alongside the ruins of the ancient Roman aqueduct, a reminder that this was once a region rich in fresh water. Today, it's one of the areas most at risk for drought and climate change. Some try to find water by illegally drilling down to the water table. Authorities often track down those who risk this and confiscate farmers' machines.
Généralement, pour creuser un forage, le monsieur, il commence par faire un mur.
To dig a borehole, we start by building a little wall to camouflage the machine. They're rotary machines. That's the drilling tool. These are the rods. So far we've seized 50 machines that are illegal. That means they are not registered.
But Tarek says he also tries to help farmers find legal alternatives. People like Rida, who can no longer irrigate his land properly.
I had authorization and a license to drill legally since 1997 with this pump. I had water, and the more it went, the more I dug. But for a year I haven't had any water at all.
He had to switch crops to avoid using too much water.
These olive trees are my source of income. Before, I grew watermelons and tomatoes, but now the water table is low and it's too expensive.
In the run-up to summer, engineers had been counting on this dam to recharge the water table. But this year the rains have been less frequent, and even with rain, old dams don't have the capacity to hold as much water as before.
The problem is that the water that flows in the dam brings sediment with it, and this decreases the water storage capacity.
Disrepair can see dams lose up to 20% of their capacity. The recent spring rainfall will bring some respite, but there's still challenges in the long.
Now, bits of huge masses of plastic waste drifting atop of Lake Kivu have been breaking off and clogging up the turbines of the largest hydroelectric plant in eastern DR Congo. The Ruzizi Dam has been polluted by piles of rubbish that can reach up to 40 meters deep. Trapped trash can leave towns without power, as Laurent Berstecker tells us.
Standing in the middle of Lake Kivu, the Ruzizi hydroelectric dam powers a majority of households in eastern DRC. But since late January, one of its 4 reactors has been out of commission after being damaged by a constant influx of plastic waste.
Tous les déchets qu'on jette dans le lac ou dans la rivière viennent échouer ici, quel que soit l'endroit où on a jeté ça. Même à Goma, les déchets qu'on jette là-bas, c'est question seulement du temps.
Sucked in by the dam, thousands of plastic bottles, cans and containers pile up near the turbines, forming layers of waste that sometimes reach 14 meters in depth. The National Electricity Company says it has to hire divers to clean the riverbed, but on most days, employees must clear out the trash using only a small barge.
Hii kazi ya kutosha uchafu kunakuwa nayo panda. Unakuta hata hii manivu ya kupata hata mamitumbu juu ya kutosha uchafu ni problem.
Hoping to tackle the issue, authorities have begun reaching out to local populations to teach them about waste management practices.
Nous sommes en train de sensibiliser la population, d'éviter de jeter ces déchets dans les caniveaux. C'est vraiment dangereux pour les machines.
But with garbage collection services costing up to $5 a month, many locals say they simply can't afford to have their trash picked up.
And finally, we head to Ivory Coast, one of the most cheerful nations on the continent. On the global index, though, it's still below the halfway point, coming in at 88 out of 146 countries surveyed, with the index's top-ranked African country, Mauritius, sitting at just 52. But let's look on the bright side. Hanan Ferjani brings us her sunny take from Abidjan.
Coming behind only Mauritius and Libya, Ivory Coast is one of Africa's happiest countries and the West African frontrunner. The 2022 World Happiness Report has been released annually for the last decade, using subjective local perceptions alongside 6 indicators of GDP per capita, social support, life expectancy and good health, freedom, generosity, and corruption. Ivory Coast scored 5.2 out of 10 this year, a performance put down to its rising GDP per capita over the last few years. According to the the IMF, that's gone up from $1,700 in 2012 to $2,500 in 2021. Now, in the streets of Abidjan, most people we spoke to agreed that there's a lot to celebrate, but some also pointed out room for improvement.
I think Ivorians' happiness is conditioned by the cost of living.
We are together. We gather on Saturdays, go out to bars and restaurants. There are so many things to do in Ivory Coast.
I think we struggle in the Ivory Coast because everything, schooling, housing, food is expensive. Even hospital care is meant to be free, but you have to pay when you go there.
You can make a little money and go back to your home in peace. We have everything. People should come see for themselves. Things are good here. We're happy.
Ivory Coast went from 99th place in 2019 to 88th in 2022. Amongst the other top-ranked African countries are South Africa, the Gambia, and Algeria. However, the continent also features strongly right at the bottom of global rankings. 8 out of 10 least happy countries are African, including Tanzania, Botswana, and Rwanda. Zimbabwe came in 144th out of the 146 countries mentioned.
And now Johnny there for us. Well, that's it for Eye on Africa. Thanks for joining us, and do so again if you can. Take care.